North Korea, a very secretive state with a formidable military presence. Throughout the years, its forces have fielded quite a large number of not only uniforms and equipment, but also camouflage. However, with the rare exception, these uniforms have mostly stayed within the country, leaving many collectors and just those curious about their equipment to speculate based on photos and footage from media outlets and reports. Well, that's going to change right now with this video as we inspect one of North Korea's camouflage uniforms. Kind of. In this video, we'll be taking a look at a camouflage uniform worn by North Korean troops, seen in 2002's Die Another Day, the last James Bond movie starring Pierce Brosnan as 007.
Let's put it on.
Put what on?
So for those who are not familiar with the Bond franchise, Die Another Day was both the 20th film in the series and was released during the 40th year anniversary, which commemorated the release of the first movie, Dr. No, back in 1962. Now, if for whatever reason you haven't watched this film, there are spoilers coming up. Seriously though, if you're planning on starting the Bond franchise, don't start with this one, as this installment is one of the weirder, more recent entries, not only because of the story, but also because of hovercraft chases, diamonds, diamond faces, diamond space death rays, stealth surfing, surfing on glacial tidal waves, North Korean colonels undergoing plastic surgery to resemble white English businessmen with the inability to sleep, Mr. Kill, melting ice hotels, lasers, lots and lots of lasers, arguably the highest ratio of bad puns to runtime, electrical supersuits, invisible cars, falling supercars, high dives off of Cuban forts, VR sunglasses, and intense fencing duels. So there's quite a bit going on with this one, but let's actually talk about these camouflage uniforms. They were seen during two parts of the movie, the pre-title sequence when Bond infiltrates North Korea to impersonate a diamond dealer who is buying weapons to funnel to Africa, and towards the end, where Bond and Jinx infiltrate North Korea again to board Gustav Graves' plane. The bigger of the two, where all the camouflage pieces are seen, is the first section. While Bond is in the base, he encounters numerous soldiers, many of whom are wearing the pattern. The set here appears to be the most common cut created for the production. Seen with them were helmet covers, hats, as well as coats, which included shoulder tabs and a few other minor differences, along with a few that boasted a fur collar and liner. This set, however, was purchased off of Prop Store's website. As of this video's release, they still have a few available to buy. Link to the page can be found below. We're not sponsored by them in any way, they just always seem to get more interesting military-related costumes and props for major movies. That aside though, this uniform sports a few interesting features, most notably the actual camouflage pattern. Featuring four colors, green, brown, tan, and a light orange, this design is almost reminiscent of a duck hunter or sort of jigsaw style design. One's first assumption is that this was an entirely made-up one for the production, but it appears to be actually based off of a real-world pattern that was fielded by North Korea during the 1990s. That pattern's actual name or designation isn't really known, but when you put the two side by side, you'll notice the colors are almost identical and the shapes appear very similar as well. So it seems that there was a good amount of attention to detail, at least with the actual camouflage pattern, as this design and color scheme seems to be distinctly North Korean. They could have gone with a few other easier camouflages used by North Korean troops between the 70s and 2001, when production began, which were provided or inspired by foreign countries such as China or the Soviet Union. But let's actually take a look at the uniform itself. Made of a thicker twill fabric, it is pretty sturdy and a bit coarse, and as you can tell, it's obviously a bit worn and beaten up, presumably from wear and tear caused by the production. Best guess was this set was used during the base shootout scenes, which saw a lot of soldiers thrown around by explosions and hit with all sorts of debris, dirt, and mud. Additionally, there's a bit of rust markings along the shoulders, which is more than likely from the pieces being hung on metal hangers while filming, or during some point after shooting those scenes and when it arrived for this video in July of 2021. A little friendly PSA here, no matter what clothing you have, never use metal hangers to store your garments long term. Not only are they flimsy, can bend easily, or scratch yourself or the clothing, but they can also easily rust, causing damage to the shoulders and areas that touch the metal.
Now we know.
And knowing is half the battle.
Back on track though, the jackets include a tag on the inside from what was likely the company that produced them, Fashionizer London, along with a simple L for large. This one includes a couple of letters written in marker, which is common for pieces like this, which was probably to denote the extra who used them. Now, many of these jackets also featured a few patches and accessories sewn on. First up are a pair of red collar tabs that included metal laurel star emblems, which appear to be attached with a sort of loop and hook system rather than a pin or foldable metal ends that you'd expect. But the most interesting parts are the name tapes and shoulder insignia. Below those are two chest pockets closed by a single button which looks wooden in appearance but is actually more of a resin-type plastic. The two name tapes that are found above these are made of a sort of vinyl material, with the green one having characters appearing to be handwritten which, to the best of our ability, translates to the name Li Bong Chung. On the other side is a slightly larger cream-colored tape, which has its characters in a more font-style appearance that translates to Chongchon One Dong Day. Though it can't be said for certain, this may be inspired by two major victories achieved by North Korea and the People's Volunteer Army of China, PVA for short, during the Korean War from 1950 to 1953. Chongchon is more than likely a reference to the Battle of Chongchon River that occurred at the end of 1950. Located in the northern part of North Korea, this battle was a turning point which saw the PVA stop South Korean and UN forces from advancing to the Chinese border, which likely would have resulted in North Korea ceasing to be a country. From there, the combined forces of China and North Korea reclaimed the remainder of the DPRK, leading to a stalemate of sorts around the 38th parallel until 1953. The second reference to Dongdae is likely referring to the Dongdae mountain range, an outlying section of the much larger Taebaek Mountains, which run through most of the eastern portion of the Korean peninsula. In reference to battles, this region saw some of the earliest fighting in the war, which involved North Korea pushing South Korean forces by way of a pincer movement all the way south to the southeastern section of the country. This engagement, known as the Battle of Pusan Perimeter, nearly resulted in the total defeat of South Korean forces. However, they were able to hold out long enough for US and UN reinforcements to arrive and launch a counterattack. With that little history lesson out of the way, we can move on to the other patches that have more intricate designs, but not as much history behind them. The red banner-shaped shoulder patch simply translates to Special Forces, while the one on the other side, which includes a person in some sort of wet or frogman suit in front of what's presumably a shark of some type, says on the top Special Forces with the lower portion reading Joint Army and Navy. The sleeves have a small reinforced section around the elbow, with the cuffs being able to be adjusted by the same style of buttons as the pockets. The interesting bit about these is how the adjustment is done. Usually you'll see a separate flap for that which can be buttoned to shrink the arm opening. However, this one is a single piece with two buttonholes lined up and sewn closed at one end. It can then be folded onto one of the two buttons and secured that way. Finally, the front is closed by 7 primary buttons with an 8th and final one attached very close to the top along the collar. The most interesting thing about this is that it's almost a hybrid of a Mandarin style with a point style collar, in that it appears as if a pointed collar was added to a very shallow Mandarin collar at the top. Moving on, we have the pants. This particular pair is a bit small compared to the jacket and lacks any sort of internal tags or identification of any kind, but it is still a rather interesting piece due to some design choices. The first is the fly, which is closed primarily by 2 buttons, though this one is missing one, minus the waist section, which is secured by a pair of metal hooks and loops. Again, speculation here, but this may have been done so as to allow for quick removal while on set. Going around the waist are 3 wide belt loops, all of which can be unbuttoned from the upper section along the waistline. The back sees a rather oddly shaped reinforced seat area, as it appears to be almost perfectly rectangular in shape going down the legs. Finally, it has 2 waist pockets which for whatever reason have flaps, each of which are closed by a single button. And that'll more or less do it. Again, as mentioned at the start, there were a few other items made in this pattern, such as hats, helmet covers, and a heavier coat, but those seem to be a bit harder to find. The effort put into these uniforms by the design and wardrobe departments is commendable, as they definitely invoke a level of authentic North Korean style, and with the included hidden flair in the name tapes adds a bit more uniqueness to them. A special thanks to Far East Tactical Discord user Victor, who provided information relating to the name tapes' possible meanings. If you want to pick up a set as of this video's upload, they are still available on Prop Store's website, and if you have yet to see Die Another Day, it's worth a watch, even though it's one of the most absurd and outlandish Bond entries. Until next time, everyone.